that Genesis 45 is where we are. And the reality is, guys, we only have 7 more messages in Genesis, 4 this month, 4 in February, and then the series ends. And I can't believe it. I'm a little sad and dealing with the emotions of Genesis, because I've never spent more time in my preaching career teaching through and preaching through a book than we have Genesis, and we've been radically transformed by this book. Those of you that have been locked in from the very beginning, you know this is great. We are talking about reconciliation in this Jacob and Joseph section. We are in part 4 of this message mini-series within Genesis as Joseph reunites and reconciles with his brothers. Again, this is part 4, Genesis 45 on today. And you guys remember where we were last week in chapter 44 as Joseph has set up this final test to test his brothers' fidelity to their siblings, because there's been a lot of sibling rivalry and confusion and competition and consternation and cruelty and horrible mistreatment of Joseph by his brothers. And before Joseph launches in, he's ready to reunite with his brothers, but he's not ready to reconcile with them. And we made the distinction last week that when people have hurt us, when they have mistreated us, when they've sinned against us, when they've traumatized us and wounded us, when they return to reunite, we should go to lunch and have coffee and that sort of thing. But we can't re-enter relationships until we've proven and tested whether they've truly repented and been transformed by God, so that they're no longer a threat to hurt us again in the future. Joseph sort of proved the point by taking his brothers through this really cruel test, but it was necessary to see if they would galvanize around their youngest brother Benjamin. And that's exactly what happened as Judah offers to be a slave for Benjamin because he had been found with the silver cup in chapter 44. Now, in chapter 45, Joseph is convinced that his brothers have been reformed, they've been revived, they've been renewed, they've changed. And so what we see, there are 2 major movements today. In verses 1 through 15, Joseph finally reveals his identity to his brothers. So let's look at verses 1 through 15 as a unit. And then we'll look at verses 1 through 4 kind of as a subunit as Joseph's revelation to his brothers. This has been a long time coming, and finally we get to this moment where the text says, Genesis 45:1, Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all of his attendants, so he called out, send everyone away from me. No one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers. Judah's speech from last week was so compelling that Joseph could no longer restrain his sympathy. Judah's speech that highlighted his self-sacrificing sentiment for Benjamin and his sympathy for Jacob was so compelling that Joseph could no longer restrain his composure in front of his Egyptian courtiers, and so he sent them all out. Now, this is the 3rd time that Joseph has lost his composure in his brother's presence. Remember in 42, verse 24, and then in chapter 43, verse 30, Joseph has become emotional in his brother's presence. This time, the 3rd time is a trick, because each time that he has gotten emotional in his brother's presence, he has had to excuse himself, regain his composure, get his emotions in check, and then come back out to his brothers. This time, he can't do it. He won't do it. And so he dismisses his Egyptian servants and courtiers because he wants to have a moment alone with his brothers. And then in verse 2, he finally gets verse 2 and 3 and 4. Look at this. It says, verse 2, but he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the Pharaoh's household heard it as well. As soon as the Egyptian courtiers and his servants and people in his administration left out of the room, Joseph weeps so loudly that the people standing on the other side of the door heard it, and they must have gone to tell Pharaoh, hey, something's going on, because we hear Joseph weeping with these men that have come from the land of Canaan. Now, we previously noted that Jeremiah is the weeping prophet, but Joseph is the weeping patriarch, right? He cries a lot. And he's not done crying. He's going to cry some more as we get to the end. Joseph is a sensitive guy who loves it. And what's behind the tears? Joseph loves his family. And for 22 years, he's been isolated from his family. They think he's dead and gone. And here his brothers are before him. They don't know that he is their little brother, Joseph. And so he gets emotionally wrapped up with all that he's been through. As they sold him into slavery. They wanted to kill him. They sold him into slavery, and then he was a slave in Potiphar's house for 11 years. He was a prisoner in prison on false charges for 2 years. Now he's been serving as the prime minister and the grand vizier of Egypt for 7 years. So it's been a long journey. Actually, it's been 9 years he's been serving as the grand vizier. And so it's been a long journey. And so here Joseph weeps before his brothers. And I'm sure they're thinking, wait, what is going on? What is this guy weeping about? Why is he crying? And why is it so loud? And why is he wailing like this? What is going on? Remember, from last week, remember his brothers are cowering at his feet right now because they're begging for mercy because Benjamin was found with the cup in his bag. So all 11 brothers are on the floor before Joseph. And now he's weeping and wailing. I'm sure they're on the floor saying, is this a good sign or a bad sign? They have no idea what's about to happen. Verse 3, it happens. Joseph says to his brothers, 2 words in the Hebrew, Ani Yosef, 3 words in the English, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But they could not answer him because they were terrified in his presence. Ani Yosef. I wonder how shocked these brothers are at this revelation. This is news they didn't see coming, and they're cowering before this Egyptian prime minister, and they don't know if this revelation that Ani Yosef is this good news or bad news? This could go either way. This could really go sideways. This could be really cool, or this could be our worst nightmare. From Joseph's perspective, this is great news. He expects for them to jump up off the floor and high five and start hugging. And, oh my God, our brother who we thought was dead, we sold into slavery. It's been 22 years. This is amazing. This is our brother. Joseph thinks this is good news. From his brother's perspective, maybe not so much, as seen by their response. They're terrified. Joseph's inquiry about Joseph's well-being is interesting because Judah had just made the longest speech in the book of Genesis about how important Benjamin is to Jacob, and that he's still alive, and if Benjamin doesn't come home, Jacob is going to die. So why is Joseph asking, is my father still alive? You know he's still alive because Judah just gave this long speech about how Jacob and Benjamin's lives are tied up into each other. So he's not asking if his father's alive. He's probably asking, how is my father doing? Is he in good health? Is he doing okay? I know the famine has been difficult for the entire region. How is Dad doing? I mean, is he kicking high but low, or is he bedridden or sick? Tell me, give me the goods on Dad. The brothers are terrified, they're horrified and they're stupefied so much that they have no response to these two words, I need Yosef. How do they respond to that? No words. Just with terror and awe. Now, I love this in verse 4. This is so good. Then Yosef said to his brothers, please come near me. And they came near. I need Yosef. He says, I am Joseph, your brother. He said, the one you sold into Egypt. Joseph implores his brothers to come closer for inspection and incrimination. For inspection, Joseph says, get up off the floor, stand on your feet, come close to me and verify that I am Joseph, your brother. That's the inspection. You guys, come, I'm your brother. I know we haven't had any real up close and personal interaction for 22 years, but smell me, look at my eyes. It's me. I'm your brother. Not only is there inspection, but there's incrimination. Joseph says, I'm the same guy that you sold into slavery. You guys did this to me, and I haven't forgotten. We're in Egypt because you sold me into slavery. Isn't this reminiscent of when Jesus appears to the disciples in the upper room? He's supposed to be dead and in the grave, and Jesus appears to the disciples, and when he appears to them, they freak out too. They are terrorized and spooked and stupefied. And Jesus says, come and see that it's me. Look at my wounds and inspect me and touch me and hold me and see that it's me, the Lord. It's not a ghost or a phantom, right? Jesus invites the 10 disciples, because remember, Thomas wasn't there and Judas had hung himself. So Jesus invites the 10 disciples to come and inspect me, check me out, and you see that it's really me. Here Joseph invites the brothers for inspection. This phrase, the one you sold into Egypt, this qualifying designation that only the true Joseph would know. I'm your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. Food for thought. Can you imagine how Benjamin reacted to hearing this news for the first time? Can you imagine Benjamin saying, wait, what? You guys sold my brother into slavery? Why? What did he do to deserve that? Why did you insinuate that he had been killed by a wild beast? Have you guys really been lying for 22 years? Can you imagine Benjamin? This is his first time hearing what his 10 brothers did to his full-blood brother, Joseph. They had concealed the truth for 22 years, and Benjamin is confronted with it, and Moses pays no attention to Benjamin's reaction, which is why on Sunday we try to bring up the things that are not in the text because they're fascinating. You think Benjamin started rolling up his sleeves wanting to go some rounds with his brothers? Y'all hold me back. It's going to be some furniture moving around in here. You guys did what? That's not in the text, but I'm sure something like that. Anyway, so I want to get to heaven and ask Benjamin, what did you say? What did you do when Joseph says, I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold to Egypt? Benjamin, what was your reaction? Because Moses doesn't tell us. Don't you want to know? Of course you do. Moses, why didn't you tell us? Now, as we move into verses 5 through 8, Joseph Joseph, we saw Joseph's revelation to his brothers, now his consolation of his brothers in verses 5 through 8. And this is as good as it gets in the book of Genesis in terms of a theology of human responsibility and divine sovereignty. I love this. This is as good as it gets in the Bible, not just Genesis. But look at Joseph's powerful theological deductions in verses 5, 6, 7, and 8. But just verse 5. And now Joseph says, and he commands them, two commands. Let's start with that. And now, first one, don't be grieved. Number one. Number two, and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. Don't be anguished and don't be angry. Why? Because in their first encounter in chapter 42, the brothers demonstrated both of these characteristics. They were grieved when they were before Joseph, and Joseph said, I'm going to keep Simeon, and you go back and bring your younger brother. And they're like, God is punishing us for what we did to our brother. So they've been anguished and stressed and grieved and sorrowful in Joseph's presence. And they've also been angry because, remember, Reuben said, did I tell you guys not to hurt the boy? So he's seen them quarreling with each other. He's seen them stressed about what has happened, and he's also seen them angry and combative with each other. I told you, but you did. You said, but I told you guys we shouldn't. He's seen that, and Joseph said, no. Not here, not now. I want you to pay attention to Joseph's theology. Look at the slide on human responsibility and divine sovereignty. Don't miss this for the rest of your lives. Joseph says to his brothers, you guys are responsible and culpable because you sold me here. But from a divine and supernatural perspective with regard to God's sovereignty, God sent me here. Don't miss that. That's as good as it gets in the Bible. You guys sold me here through your cruelty, through your hatred, your jealousy, your envy, your cold hearts. You sold me here. But the reality is God sent me here. And here in Genesis 45:5, we have the mysterious and mystic interplay between human responsibility and divine sovereignty. How does that work? Because their actions were theirs. God didn't make the brothers sell him into slavery. That was evil and wickedness in their own hearts and hatred for their own flesh and blood that sold Joseph into slavery. Well, they wanted to kill him, so it was a lesser crime to sell him into slavery. Both of them, murder and enslavement, were against Torah. I want you to see how Joseph frames this. And Joseph is challenging his brothers to look beyond their human responsibility and see what God is doing. So guys, I want to challenge you guys today in 2026 as we embark upon this new year. Will your focus be on people, on what people did to you, or what God is doing through you and to you? Where's your energy going to be? Where's your focus? Where's your perspective? Because they did wrong. And I don't have that job anymore. I don't have that relationship, or I don't get a chance to live there, or whatever you lost that somebody did to you that caused you to forfeit or have to leave behind something that was meaningful to you, something you cared about, something that you found value in, or that you found your joy in, and somebody's cruelty, somebody's sinfulness, somebody's wickedness, somebody's meanness. Now you don't have access to that, or you can't enjoy that, or you're no longer allowed in that space or place. Yeah, they did that to you. And they will suffer the consequences for what they did to you. Yes, they will. Because God is a God of mercy, as we sung in the song, but He's also a God of justice. And as we get ready in a couple of weeks to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, you guys know this quote that I love. Dr. King says, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And eventually God's justice is going to come to pass. Yes, they sold you into slavery, but will your focus be on where God is sending you? And how God's going to use you being in Egypt for a blessing? Yes, they sold you, but God sent you. And Joseph is challenging his brothers to lift up their eyes from their dastardly deeds and see the divine providence and sovereignty of God. Man, that's so good. I love it because God used the brothers' hatred and cruelty and envy ultimately to accomplish His plans and purposes in Joseph's life, and God will do the same in yours. Because that's who He is. And so I want us to lift up our eyes from what people did to us and say, God, how will you use that to accomplish your plans and purposes for my life? Because ultimately God planned and purposed for Joseph to ascend to the position of Grand Vizier and Prime Minister in Egypt for such a time as this. God divinely orchestrated the circumstances where Joseph would serve in Potiphar's house, and Joseph would serve in the prison, where God would have it that Joseph would meet the chief baker and chief cupbearer, you remember? And as God would have it again, introduce Joseph to Pharaoh to interpret his dreams regarding the upcoming years of feasting and famine, prosperity and poverty, surplus and shortage. The brothers sold him to Egypt, but God orchestrated everything else because God knew Joseph needed to be the prime minister because the famine was coming. I want you to notice Joseph also says God's objective in sending Joseph to Egypt was to preserve life. God knew how intense the famine was going to be, and so in order for the destined patriarchal family to survive the ordeal, they needed particular access to the breadbasket of the Mediterranean world, which is Egypt. But how could the patriarchal family gain this access when Egyptians despise Semites in general and herdsmen in particular? How do they get that kind of access? The Egyptians don't fool with Semites. They think that they're second-class human beings. So how are they going to gain this particular access that Jacob's large family needs in order to survive the 7-year famine? God has to, in an extraordinary and phenomenal way, bless a Semite and prosper him and favor him to such a degree that the Egyptians would look past his Semitic heritage to see his value to the Egyptian society and well-being, and that's precisely what God did. The whole ordeal, according to Joseph, was I went through hell and back so that God could send me here to preserve life. And Joseph is going to flush out that idea in these next few verses. Look at verse 6. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. And so God sent me here. The second time, God sent me ahead of you, or the Hebrew says before your face, to establish you as a remnant within the land, to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Joseph says, God sent me in advance so that I could save your lives. You hear how ironic that is? Like, they sold Joseph into slavery so Joseph could save their lives. That's wild. That makes no sense on any human level. But this is a divine ordeal, and it doesn't have to make sense. But the irony is extraordinary. The patriarchal family needs to be placed or situated or planted in the land of Egypt. Joseph says that God sent me ahead of you to establish you. To establish you means to make sure that you are rooted and planted and situated. Why? So that to keep you alive so that you can survive and ultimately thrive. You guys get that? God sent me here to keep you alive so you could survive the famine and you can ultimately thrive. Guys, I'm working my thesaurus for you guys. I'm trying to make this stuff stick for you. And that's exactly what happens, because when you open up the book of Exodus in verse 1, the Jewish people had become so numerous that the new Pharaoh, who 300 years later doesn't know Joseph, and says that the Jewish people have become more powerful and more numerous than the Egyptians. How is that possible? Jacob's family, as we will see, it's only 75 people leave Canaan to come to Egypt. 75. How does 75 people become 2 million in 300 years or so? How's that possible? So did they thrive? Absolutely. Read the book, chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, verses 5 through 9, and you will see. And Joseph says, God put me through all of that so that to keep you alive so that you could survive and thrive. Man, what a perspective Joseph has. Young man, 39 years old with that kind of wisdom. Powerful. Then lastly in verse 8 he says, therefore it was not you who sent me here, but God. Again, a third time, God sent me here. Wasn't you guys? You sold me here, but God sent me here. And he has made me, watch this, 3 things. He's made me a father to Pharaoh, 1. 2, he's made me Lord over his entire household, 2. And then 3, I am the ruler over all the land of Egypt. Joseph is a father to Pharaoh just in the sense that he's one of his most trusted advisors and confidants. Dads are great at giving advice, and so Joseph says, I am his right-hand man, and I am the one that gives him advice and counsel. And so in that regard, I'm a father to Pharaoh, and then he's a ruler over Pharaoh's household. He governs all of Pharaoh's affairs, and he's his representative in every way. And then lastly, he's ruler over the entire land of Egypt. I love this. I gave you this really good quote from John Walton, and you have these in your slides. Let me read this to you about human responsibility and divine sovereignty. Listen to the brilliant John Walton. He says this, in the end, that is the bottom line of the Joseph story, as verses 5 through 8 clearly articulates. God's sovereignty and blessing can be found in what appear to be the most heinous crimes of the most disastrous circumstances. This does not mean that God approves of the crimes or that he enjoys bringing disaster in our lives. It's simply a testimony to his ability to bring good out of evil. the depths of God's sovereignty are not demonstrated by his repression of our choices that inevitably reveal our sinfulness and fallen self-will, but by the fact that there is no choice that we make, however sinful or fallen, that can interfere with his plan. In fact, often enough, as in the case of Joseph, those choices end up furthering his plan. God did not approve of the treachery of Joseph's brothers. They are fully responsible for their crime. He did not make them do it, and he did not need their treachery to accomplish his plan. But some way or other, Joseph was going to get to Egypt and come to the place where God's blessings and deliverance would come through him. If God cannot use the sinful choices that we make, his sovereignty is limited and there's no hope for any of us. Man, that's money. God uses our good choices and our bad choices to ultimately bring about his perfect plans and purposes. Now, more can be said. We'll talk more about this Wednesday during Life Group as we wrestle with how much does human responsibility and divine sovereignty, how much is it a 50-50 split? Is it 60-40, 65-35, 70-30? What's the mixture of those two things? And we'll talk more about that on Wednesday and get you guys to weigh in on that. Verses 9 through 15, as the rest of the chapter moves pretty quickly, is Joseph's invitation to his brothers and ultimately to Jacob to relocate to Egypt for the last 5 years of the famine. Look at this. Joseph, after his revelation and consolation, hears his invitation. Verse 9, return quickly to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord over all of Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you, your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and herds and all you have. There I will sustain you, for there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you, your households, and everything you have will become destitute. Look, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin can see that I am Joseph, the one speaking to you. Tell my father about all my glory in Egypt and about all that you have seen, and bring my father here quickly. Joseph's instruction is hey, the family needs to move, and they need to move quickly because the famine is going to get more fierce and more ferocious, and they need to pack up and they need to move expeditiously, move to Egypt, move close to me in Goshen, and I will take care of you guys there because I am the Grand Vizier, I am the Prime Minister, and I have wealth and power and political influence, and I can prosper you and take care of you until the famine ends. That's his invitation. Verses 9 through 13. Now we see Joseph's affection for his brothers in verses 14 and 15. This is beautiful. Then Joseph, remember the brothers are all standing around him now because remember he invited them to come closer to inspect him and get a closer look and realize and confirm and verify that it's Joseph. Now he threw his arms around his full brother Benjamin, and he wept and Benjamin wept on his shoulder. The other brothers are his half-brothers. They got the same dad and different moms. But he and Benjamin have the same mom, same dad, so they have a connection, which is why Joseph has favored Benjamin by giving him more food and a blessing. And so here they have a reunion and they weep on each other's shoulder. Beautiful. And then in verse 15, Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept, and afterwards his brothers talked with him. So there's weeping and there's hugging and there's Joseph is kissing his brothers, which is a very Middle Eastern and Eastern way to greet and show affection for each other. And we noted this in Genesis 37, verse 4, that his brothers were unable to speak peaceably to Joseph because of Jacob's favoritism. Now, after 22 years, the brothers are finally able to have a peaceful conversation with Joseph. They had no words for him before because they hated him. They wouldn't even talk to him. They ignored him. They treated him like he didn't exist. Now, 22 years later, they're having a conversation, and I know what you're wondering, right? What did they say? What did they talk about? Don't you wonder, did the brothers say, hey man, you got to forgive us. We were young and foolish, and we were jealous, and we knew better, and we shouldn't have thrown you in that pit and treated you with such cruelty, man. Will you ever find it in your heart to forgive us? And Joseph saying, hey man, I got you guys back. God did this, and let me tell you all that I went through. From the pit you guys put me in, I was a slave in Potiphar's house, and then I ended up, is he telling them, recounting what his 22 years have been like, or what are they talking about? Don't you want to know? Don't you wish you were a fly on the wall? I do. The brothers talked with him. Moses, tell us, what did they say? No answer there. So again, we'll get to heaven, and man, you guys, Jesus is going to be doing stuff, and I'm going to be sitting down interviewing people, and you guys know every week, I got so many questions. I got books and books of questions I want to ask everybody. And Jesus is going to be establishing his kingdom, and they're going to be like, man, where's Daryl? I don't know, man. You're probably in the corner somewhere interviewing somebody. And you missing all the cool things Jesus is doing, man. But he got his notebook, and he's got an Oprah Winfrey show going on in heaven. Last movement, again, this all moves quickly as the brothers, verses 16 through 28, the brothers return home to share the news with Yaakov or Jacob. Watch this but before they leave, Pharaoh's confirmation of Joseph's invitation. Look at Pharaoh weighing in and confirming that they're going to be generous and that they're going to protect and preserve Jacob's family when they come down. Look at this. This is beautiful because Pharaoh doesn't have to do this, but it shows that Joseph's favor and his influence has now challenged his boss to love his family too. His family he's never met. But Joseph is such an amazing person that Pharaoh says, anybody you love, I love. And anybody you want to bless, I'm all in to bless them as well. Watch this. This is beautiful. Verses 16 through 20. When the news reached Pharaoh's palace, Joseph's brothers have come. That's the news. Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers to do this. Now he's given his instruction. Joseph already gave them instruction, but Pharaoh says, I'm the king of Egypt. Here's what your brothers should do. Load your animals and go back to the land of Canaan. Get your father and your families and come back to me, Pharaoh says. Joseph's your brother. Come back to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you can eat from the riches of the land. Pharaoh says, I'm going to give you the filet mignon of Egypt when you come down. You're also commanded to tell them to do this, to take wagons from the land of Egypt for your dependents and your wives to bring your father down here. We want you to travel first class as you return to Egypt. And do not be concerned about your belongings that you have in Canaan, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Hey, Pharaoh says travel light. Don't bring all your lamps and your sofas and all of your pots and pans. Travel light. I'm going to give you the best of the land. You can replenish and restock when you get here. Isn't that awesome? Now here's what's fascinating. Egyptians don't like Semites like that. They won't even eat with them, you guys remember from chapter 43. So where does all this goodwill and magnanimous generosity come from? Because they're in love with Joseph. Joseph has made such an impression that they want to bless anybody associated with Joseph, because the only reason they're surviving the famine is because of what? Because of Joseph. So guys, let me ask you, it's the first Sunday in 2026. Who's going to get a blessing this year because of you? Who's going to get the best of the land and the richness of the land because of you, because of your goodwill, because of your faith, because of your character, your integrity, because of your faithfulness to God? Who stands to get a blessing, not because of them, but because of you? Who have you been a reference to lately? Who have you sent a letter of recommendation for on somebody else's behalf? When's the last time you did that? When's the last time you called in a favor on behalf of someone else? When's the last time someone directly benefited from your relational credibility? I want to challenge us to have that kind of impact in 2026. To have a Joseph-like impact in this new year. Man, Pharaoh's confirmation and invitation to the family is just wildly magnanimous, and his goodwill is not lost on Joseph and his 11 brothers. Now, Joseph's provision for the journey home and the return to Egypt, verses 21 through 24, as we race to our conclusion. The sons of Israel did what Pharaoh and Joseph told them, and Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and gave them provisions for the journey. And Joseph gave each of his brothers changes of clothes, but he gave Benjamin 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothes. Can we just talk about the change of clothes? Throughout Joseph's chronicles, we've emphasized the importance of the anthropological significance of the garment motif, haven't we? When Joseph is invested with a new garment, it symbolizes his promoted social status, and conversely, when he's divested of his garments, it exemplifies his demotion of social status. So isn't it ironic that the person who was heartlessly stripped of his glitzy garment in chapter 37 is now in a position to grant new garments to the very people who stripped him of his in the first place? And that's good. Y'all, I'm preaching, you don't pay me. That's good. Y'all got to show some more excitement than that. I remember when his brother said, "Here comes that master dreamer." What did they do when Joseph shows up? They stripped him of his garment and threw him in that cistern, remember? When Potiphar's wife was trying to frame him for that false charge of rape, what did she do? She stripped off his garment. When Joseph is in prison, he probably received prison clothes. When he was sold into slavery, he received a slave's garment. When he goes to meet Pharaoh for the first time, they change his clothes and they shave him. And then when he becomes the prime minister, he's given royal garbs. So Joseph has had his garments stripped from him and given to him. He's been invested and divested of his clothes all throughout the Chronicles. Remember Tamar, when she was a widow, she has on her widow's garment. And then when she's going to go become a prostitute to try to seduce Judah, she puts on her prostitute's clothes, right? Garments, and we've been talking about clothes all throughout this mini-series. You guys tracking with me? And here, Joseph, they stole his coat from him, and here he is giving his brothers new clothes. So what is Joseph doing by giving them clothes? He's elevating and promoting their social status. These garments are not Semitic garments. He's giving them Egyptian clothes to put on. Because you guys are going home and you're coming back to Egypt, and you can't come down here looking any old kind of way because I'm the prime minister. So here's some fresh clothes, really well done. This is the tailor-made custom stuff. The finest in the world is what they're going home with. Because Joseph is saying, you guys are now royalty along with me because you guys are my people. That's a sign that this family is moving in a different direction, isn't it? Now, 23 and 24, he sent his father the following. Gift to his brothers, new clothes. Benjamin, he gets 5 sets and some silver. But what is he sending home to his dad to convince him to come to Egypt? He sent his father the following in verse 23. 10 donkeys carrying the best products of Egypt and 10 female donkeys carrying grain and food and provisions for his father on the journey to Egypt. So Joseph sent his brothers on their way, and as they were leaving, he said to them, don't argue on the way. He gives them a change of clothes and a change of attitude. Now, I don't particularly like this translation that says don't argue on the way. Don't be anguished or argumentative on the way. The Hebrew word regaz has both meanings. So which does Joseph intend? And this word can mean to tremble or to quake or to be shaken. Usually it means to shudder or to be deeply moved or to be shaken because of grief or trouble. Or it can mean to argue or to be argumentative or to be combative. What does Joseph mean? Obviously, the Christian Standard Bible, they chose the argumentative translation because he says here from what I gave you, don't argue on the way. I don't think that's what Joseph was referring to. And I'll tell you why. The majority of the instances where this word regaz is used, it's usually referring to somebody who's trembling or quivering or shaken because they've been greatly moved by some tragedy or some calamity or some adversity or some difficulty. Rarely is it used to show someone who is moved or shaken because they're angry. So the majority of the uses are about someone who's been traumatized, not someone who's angry. And so that's just the majority use. And what's been the brothers' disposition in chapter 45? Are they angry or are they anguished? Yeah. They're disturbed because they don't know, even as Joseph has blessed them, they don't know whether Joseph can be trusted. Because remember, this is the same Joseph last week or in the text yesterday who put together this whole ruse to incriminate Benjamin. And he took them to hell and back mentally and emotionally by this charade that Joseph inflicted on his brothers to test them. So we don't know if Joseph is trustworthy. So I think because of the immediate context and them cowering before Joseph in chapter 44, that he's saying to them, hey, as you go home, don't be shaken. Don't tremble. Don't be anxious. Don't be afraid. I'm here to love you guys. You're my flesh and blood, and I'm going to take care of you guys and dad and your wives and your children and your grandchildren. I'm here to love you guys. We're blood is thicker than mud. I don't think they believe it. Now, here's a little bit of a spoiler alert. They don't trust Joseph, and we're going to see it even when we get to chapter 50. They still don't trust him. They've moved to Egypt, they've settled in, and they still don't think Joseph is on the up and up. Especially when Jacob dies. And now he don't have to worry about his father. They think Joseph is going to retaliate at any moment. And Joseph is saying to them, hey, brothers, I'm not about retaliation. I'm about reconciliation. And they don't believe it. So I think he says to them, don't be afraid on your way. Now, the last few verses are Jacob's variation and his ambivalence when he finds the news when they go home. Watch this, verse 25, 26, 27, and 28. So they went up from Egypt and came to their father Yaakov in the land of Canaan. And they said to their father, Joseph is still alive, and he's the ruler of all the land of Egypt. Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. Stop right there. It says he was pug. He was cold, numb, or paralyzed, helpless, and faint. He's believed that his son has been dead for 22 years. His sons lied to him and said, a wild beast has devoured Joseph. And now to get blindsided by the news that Joseph is alive and he's the prime minister of Egypt, Jacob says, man, I'm going to just die and go to heaven. Y'all going to kill me with it because I don't believe this at all. Now, it's interesting that Jacob doesn't believe his sons when they're telling him the truth. But in chapter 37, when they were lying to him about Joseph being dead, he believed that. Little narrative irony there. No, disbelief. But sometimes seeing is believing, verses 27 and 28. But when they told Jacob all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, and the spirit of their father Jacob revived, then Israel said, enough, my son Joseph is alive, and I will go and see him before I die. Now he believes. He's seen all them wagons and all of that food and the provisions and the best of the land of Egypt. He said, okay, I believe you guys now. My seeing is believing. I thought we were supposed to walk by faith and not by sight. Nah, not for Jacob. He said, you guys are liars and deceivers and manipulators. I don't believe nothing you say, but I can't deny what I see, the limos I see parked out front of the house. That convinced Jacob that his sons was telling the truth. Now, here's the Quorum Deo. I know I've kept you long, but man, I had 6 pages of notes and we had to get through. This is good. The first Quorum Deo, here's how we endeavor to live this out in the presence and before the face of our God. Here are the takeaways. Number 1, a godly life, as it should be, is lived with 2 perspectives: human responsibility and divine sovereignty. Don't ever, 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 ever forget that. Joseph says, you sold me here, but God sent me here. Guys, that is money, and there's no charge, as Pastor Mike would say, for that one. Number 2, God brings good out of evil. As John Walton said, the cross of Jesus is our eternal emblem of this fact. Notice that God bringing good out of evil is not a New Testament idea. You see, it's rooted in the Torah story and rooted in Genesis. God takes their cruelty and he brings preservation of life out of it. And then number 3, while resisting the impulse to prioritize retaliation, let us be fully committed to reconciliation. Joseph was committed to reconciliation, but his brothers are worried that he's really going to flip the script and retaliate against us for what we did to him. And they got to live in the fear of their own guilt. And Joseph is not interested in retaliating against anybody. But he wants to move the family toward reconciliation. So God, we thank you for the rich theology of Genesis 45. I don't think we will ever forget this text. God, thank you that there is an interplay and an interfacing between human responsibility and divine sovereignty. God, give us wisdom and discernment to know how this works and what you're calling us to do. To know the difference between when people are selling us here and when you are sending us here or there. God, thank you that you bring good out of evil. You did it in the life of Joseph and his brothers. You did it through the cross of Jesus, through the greatest act of cruelty and human barbarianism in human history. You brought salvation and redemption and reconciliation out of the cross. And God, may we be the type of people who are not motivated by retaliation, but are committed to global reconciliation of the nations to God. So God, have your way in 2026 as we take these principles and these propositions and we put them into practice for your glory and for your name's sake, in order that your kingdom might come and your will might be done on earth just as it is in heaven. In the mighty and matchless and majestic name of Jesus we pray. And everybody said, amen.